Imagine for a second that you decide to reread your favorite book of all time.
Right.
Let's say you've read it, a dozen times. You know the characters, you know the vibe, you know the exact moral of the story.
You've got it all mapped out in your head.
Exactly. But this time, as you turn the pages, the story starts shifting right in front of your eyes. Like, the heroes suddenly look a lot more like villains.
Yeah.
The minor characters are suddenly stepping into the spotlight. The whole moral compass of the universe has just been completely flipped upside down.
That is such a wild concept.
It really is. And you realize, with a bit of a shock, that the story you thought you knew, well, it wasn't an absolute truth at all. It was just one translator's opinion.
It's a completely unsettling feeling, honestly. I mean, we like to think of classic literature, especially these ancient texts, as these solid, unchanging monuments, carved in stone.
Right, like they're fixed forever.
Yeah, exactly. But the reality is that translation is fluid. It is an active interpretation, and every interpreter brings their own baggage to the table.
You might think you know Homer's Odyssey, but today we are looking at a stack of fascinating notes that prove this epic poem is an absolute shapeshifter.
Oh, absolutely.
We are diving deep into two vastly different translations of this ancient text to see how they don't just change the story, but actually act as mirrors for the historical eras they were written in.
Which is just so cool to see unfold.
It is. Now, I do want to clarify something for you listening. We are going to be exploring some notes today that view these texts through very modern, sometimes politically charged lenses.
Yeah, that's an important point.
The source material uses terminology like feminist, counter-feminist, or even makes references to modern movements like #MeToo. And our goal as your guides today isn't to take political sides or endorse those specific labels.
Right, we're just analyzing the data.
Exactly. We are just here to impartially report on how these notes frame two entirely opposite approaches and how those approaches literally rewrite history.
And to see that in action, we're going to look at two titans of translation who sit at completely opposite ends of this massive timeline.
Right.
In the modern corner, we have Emily Wilson, who published a really groundbreaking English translation in 2017.
Okay.
And then in the historical corner, going all the way back to the 16th century, we have Simon Scheidenreisser, who published his German translation in 1537.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we want to understand how a single text can become so vastly different, we really need to start by looking through the modern lens, right? To see what it reveals about the past.
Yeah, makes sense.
So let's look at Emily Wilson's 2017 version. The notes we have spend a really significant amount of time on her opening line, which completely breaks from centuries of tradition.
It really does. I mean, for generations, translators have opened the Odyssey by calling Odysseus a hero of many devices, or the man of twists and turns.
Very epic sounding.
Exactly. They lean heavily into these grand, almost mystic titles that immediately put him on a pedestal.
Right.
But Wilson abandons all of that grandiosity. Her translation simply begins, "Tell me about a complicated man."
A complicated man. I mean, it completely changes your expectation as a reader right out of the gate.
It strips away all the heroism right from line one.
It does. It embraces this human nuance. Now, critics and fans frequently label her translation as feminist, but the core argument we are looking at today suggests that what Wilson is actually doing isn't about injecting modern feminism into the text at all.
Right.
It's about pure accuracy.
That is the absolute crux of her approach. For centuries, earlier translators who were, let's face it, almost exclusively male, layered their own anachronistic misogyny and cultural biases onto Homer's original Greek.
So they were adding stuff that wasn't there.
Exactly. And Wilson's goal is to remove that historical buildup. And she does this through an incredibly strict adherence to the original Greek terminology.
Right.
Alongside this very rigid structural constraint, she actually matches Homer's original Greek line count.
Which is incredibly difficult to do in English, right?
Oh, it's virtually impossible for most people.
Because, English usually takes way more words to convey the same complex ideas that you find in ancient Greek.
It requires extreme precision by forcing herself to match the exact number of lines and doing it in this tight, rhythmic, iambic pentameter.
Wow.
She doesn't have the luxury of adding Victorian fluff,
Yeah.
or extra descriptive adjectives.
She has to get straight to the point.
Right. She has to be economically tight, which forces a much more direct, punchy translation.
Yeah.
And that actually gets closer to the original oral tradition of the poem.
So she isn't rewriting the story to be feminist. She is just removing the patriarchal filters that were added much later.
Precisely.
Let's look at a really striking piece of evidence for this in the notes. There's a specific Greek word, Demoi,
Yes.
which refers to the enslaved women in Odysseus's household. For generations, when earlier translators described the women who were abused by the suitors invading Odysseus's home, they translated Mai using words like whores or willing sluts.
Which is just a profound mistranslation.
It completely shifts the blame onto the victims.
It does. If you look at the original Greek, Homer uses the word biaios to describe the actions of the suitors toward these women.
Okay.
Biaios translates literally to with violence or forcible.
Right.
So Wilson translates this accurately as rape. She emphasizes their actual status. They are enslaved people who are the victims of systemic violence.
Rather than casting them as, like, willing participants in their own abuse.
Exactly. Earlier translators did that just to protect the reputation of the men in the story.
I have to admit, I want to push back on this just a little bit.
Sure.
When you hear about an ancient text being updated to focus on systemic violence and marginalized victims, I mean, it's easy to wonder if Wilson is, for lack of a better term, wokeifying the text.
That's a critique she gets a lot.
Right. Like, is she artificially softening the ancient world to make it more palatable for a hypersensitive 21st century audience?
It's a common critique, but if you dig into the mechanics of what she's actually doing, it's the exact opposite of softening.
How so?
Well, by translating biaios as rape, instead of glossing it over, she is making the text much harsher. She is exposing the brutal, unvarnished reality of the ancient era.
Oh, I see.
She humanizes the marginalized characters, yes, but she does so to show the deep, inherent cracks in the patriarchal hero myth.
So she isn't adding the cracks.
No. The crucial point here is that those cracks were already there in the original Greek.
Wow.
The earlier translators were the ones who softened the text by hiding the violence behind derogatory words for the women just so the men wouldn't look as bad.
It sounds like Wilson is an art restorer.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Like, think about an ancient, masterful painting that has been coated in centuries of yellowed, smoky varnish by different museum curators who, thought they were protecting or improving it.
Right, they made it look all warm and comforting.
Exactly. Then Wilson comes along with her solvent and carefully strips away all that old varnish to reveal the original colors underneath. And it turns out those original colors are much harsher, much darker, and way more complex than the idealized version everyone got used to.
She isn't repainting the canvas at all. She's just letting us see the original brushstrokes.
Right.
And it forces you, the reader, to confront a truly complicated man and all his cruelties.
If we accept that Wilson is stripping away this centuries-old varnish, my next question is, what exactly is that varnish?
That's the big question.
Right. How did it get there? To figure that out, we have to travel back nearly 500 years.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the sheer cultural mechanics of translation during the early modern period.
Okay.
And this brings us to Simon Scheidenreiser in 1537.
Let's set the scene for you listening. We are in Augsburg, Germany. It is the era of early humanism.
A very specific vibe.
Yeah, a time when scholars are starting to really look back at classical antiquity. And our guy Simon decides he's going to publish the first complete German translation of the Odyssey.
Yes,
But there is a massive historical catch.
a pretty big one.
He barely knew any Greek.
Which, seems like a fatal flaw for a translator of Greek literature.
You would think.
But you have to remember the historical context. Following the fall of Constantinople in 1453, a lot of Greek texts and scholars fled to Italy.
Right.
But actual Greek manuscripts were still incredibly scarce in Northern Europe in the 1530s.
So he didn't even have the books.
No. So Scheidenreiser didn't have easy access to the original Greek, nor did he really have the fluency. He worked almost entirely from Latin templates.
Oh, wow.
He was basically translating a translation.
But the notes suggest his linguistic limitations aren't even the most fascinating part of his work.
No, not at all.
It's his cultural agenda. Scheidenreiser took this wild, ancient, pagan world and aggressively forced it into what the analysis calls a Christian patriarchal bourgeois grid.
Right, because Augsburg in 1537 was a hub for the rising bourgeois class.
The merchants and wealthy citizens?
Exactly. People who valued strict social order, clear moral family structures, and Christian piety. Scheidenreiser wanted to turn Odysseus into a virtuous, chivalric role model, like a moral compass for the German nation.
He needed a hero that a 16th century audience could actually look up to.
Yes, And to do that, he had to systematically alter the text.
He basically puts the entire epic into a 16th century corset.
That's exactly what he does.
And the way he writes it is so different from Wilson's precise iambic pentameter. Schadenreiser uses a mix of prose and what's called doggerel verse.
Yeah, doggerel verse, which is essentially this clunky, irregular, almost sing-songy rhyme scheme.
Like a nursery rhyme.
Kind of. It completely lacks the sweeping majesty of Homeric poetry.
Right.
It was designed to appeal to the common ear of the time, making the text accessible. But it also fundamentally changes the tone, from an epic myth to something resembling a heavy-handed moral fable.
Let's look at how that moral fable handles the violence and chaos we just talked about with Wilson.
Oh, this is wild.
In Schadenreiser's version, those brutal suitors who invade Odysseus' home, the ones committing systemic violence, aren't described as abusers at all.
No.
He translates their actions as merely dancing and courting.
He erases the menace entirely. And he alters Penelope, Odysseus' wife, to fit a very specific cultural trope of his era.
Okay.
Instead of a desperate, grieving queen trying to survive a hostile takeover of her kingdom, Schadenreiser translates her as leading the suitors by the nose in a very Bavarian, coarse, moralizing tone.
He turns a deadly hostage situation into a sitcom misunderstanding.
Pretty much.
It's like a high society ball where the cunning housewife is just tricking her silly guests. The sheer audacity required to just overwrite Homer like that is staggering.
It is audacious, but you really have to look at why he's doing it.
Okay.
The 16th century in Germany was a time of massive, terrifying upheaval. The Reformation was in full swing. There were religious wars, shifting borders, peasant revolts.
So everything was falling apart.
The world felt totally chaotic. Schadenreiser takes this chaotic ancient text and smooths off all the rough, pagan, violent edges because his society desperately needed the image of an ordered, heroic patriarch.
Wow.
He manufactured order in Homer's text because he needed order in his own world.
So he glosses over the violence against enslaved people entirely, favoring a finger-wagging tone that elevates the hero.
Yes.
By today's standards, looking at it through a modern lens, his work is heavily counter-feminist.
Definitely.
But the historical reality is that Schadenreiser's approach was completely typical for a society obsessed with establishing Christian family values, just as Wilson's focus on power dynamics and systemic violence feels very typical for our modern era.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh.
We've seen how they handle general themes, but the notes provide a specific side-by-side test case to see these translations clash.
Yes, Book 5 of the Odyssey.
The Calypso episode. This is the ultimate stress test.
Yeah.
How do these two fundamentally different worldviews handle a direct confrontation between a mortal male hero and absolute female power?
To understand the stakes of this test, we have to grasp Homer's original matrix. In the ancient Greek text, there's a very clear hierarchy of power that usually surprises modern readers.
It does.
In Homer's ancient world, divinity trumps gender.
Meaning a goddess outranks a mortal man unequivocally.
Always.
Calypso is a nymph, a divine being. She holds Odysseus captive on her island for 7 years.
Right.
And the crucial point is that she doesn't hold him because she's a woman using seductive wiles on a weak man.
No.
She holds him because she is a god and he is a mortal. The power dynamic is entirely hierarchical. Her physical and magical dominance is absolute until Zeus, the king of the gods, intervenes.
So think about Schadenreiser in 1537. He is trying to build the ultimate chivalric Christian male role model.
Yeah.
How on earth does he handle this ancient reality where a female figure holds ultimate power over his hero?
He dismantles her divinity systematically.
Just takes it apart.
He initiates a series of small, intentional downgrades that form a massive rewrite of the power dynamic. First, he alters what makes Calypso divine.
Okay.
In Homer, gods eat ambrosia and drink nectar. Schadenreiser changes the text so Calypso just eats food and drink.
He strips her of her divine diet.
He really does. And he strips her of her divine home. Instead of living in a mystical grotto, Schadenreiser translates it so she just lives in a house.
House. Wow.
Furthermore, when Odysseus eventually builds a raft to leave the island, Homer's Calypso directs the process from afar, exercising her divine authority.
Like a god would.
Right. But Schadenreiser alters it so she is physically assisting him with the tools, acting like a helpful, subservient housewife.
He turns a divine hostage situation into a polite stay at a Bavarian Airbnb.
That's a hilarious way to put it, but it's true.
It's fascinating how threatened his cultural framework was by female authority, to the point where he had to domesticate a literal goddess to make the story function for his audience.
And domesticating Calypso was only half the job.
Right.
He simultaneously has to elevate Odysseus. Scheidenreisser actually adds original text praise that simply wasn't there in the Greek, calling Odysseus an ideal ruler and family man.
Just injecting his own fan fiction.
Basically, constantly highlighting his patriotic longing for his fatherland. He rewrites Odysseus so that he consistently resists Calypso from the very beginning.
Okay.
He turns him into an unwavering Christian humanist hero who successfully fends off female temptation through sheer moral fortitude.
Which completely ruins the emotional arc of the captivity.
It totally flattens it.
But the audacity doesn't stop there. He even alters the Olympian gods to fit his 16th century theology.
Yes. In the original Greek text, Odysseus is eventually freed because of a nuanced political debate among the gods, where the goddess Athena strongly advocates for him.
Right.
Scheidenreisser erases Athena's influence almost entirely. He turns Zeus into a monotheistic, unquestionable ruler, the eternal decider.
Wow.
He replaces the complex, ambiguous, polytheistic debates of the ancient gods with the unalterable will of a single male Christian-style deity.
So the patriarchal order is fortified on every single level. The divine women are silenced or domesticated, the mortal hero is made morally invincible, and Zeus becomes the Christian god.
Yep.
Okay, so flash forward to 2017. How does Emily Wilson handle this exact same episode?
Wilson restores the ancient hierarchy. Where Scheidenreisser domesticated Calypso, Wilson leans heavily into her absolute power.
Okay.
The notes highlight that Wilson explicitly translates Calypso as a goddess queen, not just a nymph.
Goddess queen. That instantly commands a different level of respect from the reader.
It immediately establishes her royal authority and divine rank. And Wilson translates Calypso's dialogue with incredible sharpness.
Tell me.
When Calypso is forced by Zeus to let Odysseus go, she doesn't just quietly step aside and help him pack.
Like the housewife version.
Exactly. Wilson translates her parting words fiercely. Mortals can never rival the immortals in beauty. And then she adds, I am taller too.
I am taller too. It's such a brilliant, intimidating flex.
It really is.
She is asserting total physical and divine dominance over him as he leaves. Wilson gives Calypso her full queen energy back, refusing to let the character be minimized.
What's fascinating here is the ripple effect that has on the story.
What do you mean?
Well, by elevating Calypso, by highlighting her genuine divine threat and her immense power, Wilson isn't actually minimizing Odysseus.
Oh, I see.
By making the obstacle he faces truly terrifying and insurmountable, she actually highlights his internal conflict and his profound vulnerability.
Because he's up against a real threat.
Exactly. Scheidenreiser's Odysseus is a flat, perfect cardboard cutout who feels no temptation and faces no real danger. Wilson's Odysseus is a deeply complicated man dealing with forces vastly more powerful than himself.
It makes him human.
It does.
So we have all the evidence on the table. We've explored the 1537 varnish and the 2017 restoration.
Right.
But the notes ask one final, ultimate question. Between these two translators, who did a better job honoring the spirit of the text?
And to judge this, they bring in a rather unconventional referee.
A mythical referee, Tiresias.
Right, the famous blind prophet of ancient Greece.
If you need a quick mythology refresher, Tiresias is the famous blind prophet who, according to myth, lived for a time as a man and for a time as a woman.
Which gave him the uniquely objective perspective on both sides of the gender divide.
In fact, he famously settled a dispute between Zeus and Hera over whether men or women enjoy sex more.
And because he answered honestly, Hera blinded him in anger, and Zeus gave him the gift of prophecy as an apology.
Talk about drama.
Right. But for the sake of this analysis, he represents the ultimate neutral arbiter of human experience.
So the notes run this incredibly fun thought experiment. They asked Tiresias to rate our two translators on a numerical rating scale, an NRS, to determine who created the more wonderful and loving translation.
And the seer's verdict is a landslide. Tiresias scores Emily Wilson a 9 and Simon Scheidenreiser a 1.
Ouch for Simon.
Yeah, pretty brutal.
But let's evaluate that logic.
Yeah.
Why such a brutal score for Scheidenreiser? Was he really doing anything worse than any other 16th century writer trying to make sense of the world?
Well, the low score isn't about him being a bad person for his time. It's about his relationship to the text itself.
Okay.
The analysis uses a brilliant metaphor here. It argues that Scheidenreiser's translation is like the love of a gardener.
A gardener.
Yeah, he looks at this wild, overgrown, chaotic, ancient plant, and he aggressively prunes it.
Oh, I get it.
He snips away the paganism, he trims down the messy violence, he completely cuts out the powerful women, all to force the plant into an orderly, presentable Christian topiary.
Wow.
It is technically impressive that he managed to do it in 1537, but it's a controlling, suffocating kind of love.
He loved the idea of the text, but not the text itself.
Exactly.
It forced it to be something it fundamentally wasn't, just so it would fit nicely in his garden. And Wilson, why does she get the 9?
Wilson, according to this thought experiment, respects the text's violent, beautiful, vulnerable complexity.
She doesn't prune it.
No, she doesn't smooth over the contradictions or try to make the ancient world polite. She lets the characters live in all their complicated, divine, and human messiness.
Right.
She didn't try to tame the text like a gardener. As the analysis beautifully puts it, she danced with it. She met the text where it was and allowed it its full, unvarnished depth.
So what does this all mean? Why does this deep dive into Homer matter for you, listening right now?
It's a great question.
I think it fundamentally shifts how we consume information on a daily basis. Because when you read a translated news article about global events, or a translated piece of research, or even a classic novel, you have to remember that you aren't just reading raw data.
No, not at all.
You are always reading the translator's era. You are reading their personal biases, their cultural anxieties, and the specific societal grid they are using to make sense of the world.
This raises an important question about the nature of classic literature itself.
Okay.
The notes argue that the Odyssey is never truly finished. The reason it has survived for 3 millennia isn't because it's a fragile artifact we have to protect. It survives precisely because it has the immense depth and resilience to withstand being pulled in these completely opposite directions.
It can take the strain.
Exactly. It can survive being a 16th century moral fable, and it can survive being a 21st century critique of systemic power.
It's essentially a mirror that reflects the anxieties of whoever is looking into it, which leaves us with a final thought for you to ponder.
Yeah.
If a translation so perfectly reflects the values of its era, like Scheidenreiser's desperate need for order in the 1500s, or Wilson's sharp focus on power dynamics today, what will the translators of the year 2500 reveal about us when they look back at how we translated our stories today?
That is a haunting thought.
What hidden biases are we completely blind to right now that will seem obvious to them? The story might be shifting shape as we speak. Until next time, keep questioning what you read.